There. And we say good evening, or maybe good morning, wherever you are. It's great to see everyone. My name is Stephen Neely. I'm your host for the virtual Dalkers meetup. And tonight I'm running almost solo, but not completely. Veronica and Emma, who normally are my co-hosts, both had other work commitments this evening and were not able to make it tonight. Somewhat in their place, we have our dear friend Selma Odom here, who's just going to be my good friend as we get to hear a couple really nice presentations. So I hope everybody's well. This is our last meetup of the year. And so it is the end of 2021, which means we've been going since March of 2020. March or April of 2020. So I mean, that's really something. I'm very impressed with us and how much we've been able to do and how many people we've met. And we have some really great plans for the new year for 2022. At the end of our little meetup tonight, I'll give you some announcements about little bits of actually the most exciting announcement of 2022. So I'll make you wait though until the very end. Our our tradition, I think maybe every little meetup that we've done is we try to meet each other just the littlest bit. And we do that by jumping into a breakout room. And so I'm going to put you in 3 breakout rooms tonight, where you'll be in there with 3 or 4 other people. And if you'd be so willing to share your video and introduce yourself and where are you located and who do you teach, or maybe who do you wish you taught, or where did you used to teach, or you don't have to be a teacher to be here, but most of us are. So say something about yourself. That's all. I'm going to call everybody back in 3 minutes. That's it. You get 3 minutes to say hi to each other. So ready, set, and go.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so then the other piece, and I hope the correct one comes up here. Do you see perpetual motion?
Yes, it looks like, I don't see a title, but that's what it looks like. Yes.
Okay,
Lots of eighth notes.
lots of eighth notes. So this is one that is in Suzuki Book 1, and I'm sure all the violinist and violist friends out there are familiar with this one. And this one, again, is notoriously difficult for students to memorize. There's a lot of repetition. So I was working on this with one of my students, and I said, let's explore this idea of motion and the word perpetual, because for her that was kind of a new word. So we talked about what that meant. And then what I did is I went ahead and I just played the piece for her. And I said, I want you to think while I'm playing the piece, of what kind of motion this is. Like, are you walking? Are you running? Or what do you imagine yourself doing? So I played it for her. And her response afterward was that she was imagining herself kind of like going about her activities at home, walking around, and then leaving the house and going in the streets and walking around in the streets. And so what we ended up doing is dividing the piece into the different sections for when she was in her house doing different activities and when she was out in the streets. So if I remember correctly, I'd have to have her here to know exactly what the different parts were, but I remember at the beginning, I think we were in the house. And then here, when the register changes, I think we go out into the streets. And so forth. So that again really helped her solidify her memory, and it also helped her play the piece, because it can be a very, for some of the students, a very academic kind of piece, and it helped her lighten up a little bit and play it with a little bit more energy and motion. Okay, so now I have one more example, which is going to be the spotted pony. Now this is a folk tune that I found. Are you seeing the spotted pony?
Yep.
Great. Okay, so I worked on this with all of my students in the program, and we talked with one of my students. We talked about the title of the piece, The Spotted Pony. And I said, what kind of motion can you imagine the pony doing during the song? And again, my process was that I played it for her, and I said, I want you to imagine what the pony is doing, okay? And so I played it through, and then she came back with a really interesting response, which is that she was imagining two different voices. And this could be because I've also done with my students some question and answer type things where we improvise. So she was maybe thinking about that. So she was imagining a young pony running around in the field. And then she was imagining a second voice, the mother calling the pony back in to say, it's time to come home. You need to stop running around in the field. And then the young pony wanted to keep running around. So I'll tell you what the different voices are. I'll play a little bit of this. So at the beginning, I believe it's the mother, from what I remember. And here's the young pony replying, saying, no, I just want to run and play. And here's the mother again. And the young pony. And it repeats, and then in this B section, it's all just the young pony running around. It's like the young pony got its way and it's just going to run free for a while. And then what we did after that is we practiced playing the different roles. So I would say, you're going to be the young pony and I'll be the mom, and we would play back and forth on Zoom, and then we switched the roles. And again, I just found that not only did it help with her memory, but she played it a little lighter with a little more sense of motion. So I think my 5 minutes are probably up now. But those are the 3 musical examples I wanted to share with regards to storytelling and expressivity and play and in the Zoom classroom.
Super. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Those were all lovely. Great. Well, next, we've got Terry Boyarski, who's in, Terry, are you in Cleveland? Do I have that right?
I am.
That's what I thought. So Terry's in Cleveland, Ohio, here in the United States. And I'm going to let you, I don't want to hack the title of this. So I'm going to let you tell us the title, and you have 10 minutes.
I hope. So, okay. Hi, everyone. I'm going to talk about Russian chastushki. And why did I get interested in Russian chastushki is because I play with a Russian balalaika player from Siberia. And I've been studying this phenomenon. I've also trying to become fluent in Russian. And it's just a fascinating phenomenon. In the village in Russia, and for hundreds of years, chastushki are rhymed couplets. And an event or a happening where chastushki appear is usually maybe outdoors in a public space, in a park, or at an event like a wedding or a picnic, or in the forest, or waiting for the metro. And these rhymed couplets start because you've got some musician sitting there playing a very complicated ostinato on his garmoshka. That's a folk accordion. Often it's a button accordion on both sides. Or you can have a balalaika player creating some really intricate ostinato pattern, probably 32 measures, something like that, depending on how you count it. So the ostinato background starts up, and maybe some old woman stands up and starts teasing a younger man in rhymed couplets, improvised. And if the young man decides to take the challenge, he stands up and he throws back another rhymed couplet at her, also improvised. And in between, there's time in the ostinato for thinking, dancing, doing some shuffling or some stomping while you're thinking a very clever rhyme. Now, they're all run the gamut. They can be sweet, they can be teasing, they can be naughty, they can be political, they can be bawdy. And I'm going to show you a few examples of contemporary happenings in the park. So I have to remember how to share my screen. Here's the first example. Oh no.
It's almost coming up.
It says, okay, wait a minute.
It's started, but hasn't come through yet. Oh, there we go. Now
а теперь он называет старая духовочка. Что-нибудь наделаем, кому забор поломаем, кому ребенка сделаем.
На тысячу думан был пошел, загорелось стружки, Жириновский сам залил из своей печушки.
Вот придется поухаживать, Саша миленький за ним.
Okay, I'm going to show you another example. Can you see the screen?
yes.
And you get this, you get the energy of it. It's very playful, very teasing, and it's gathered a crowd. And if you're really clever, the crowd you'll hear laugh, because some of these things are really funny or naughty.
У меня миллионка два, табуретка и балда, табуретка ходит редко, а балда и никогда. Я не знаю, с кем гуляю, там в заре, с двух убью, а с пятым я гулять пойду.
I'll show you another example.
Смотрела в потолок, не твои милые яйца, наш котенок поволок.
На Савеловском вокзале бабу поездом прижав, срезал сиськи и пупок, манду дальше поволок.
Бог душу отдала, руки, ноги в монастырь, пизду ребятам, холостым.
Положили бабку в гроб, дед целует ее в лоб. Бабка хочешь, как везде, дед целуй меня везде.
Okay, and one more example. Now you see, they're not really singing. It's kind of a sing-song chant. Okay, and all right, just one more little example.
А я работать не способна и трудиться не могу, а трахаться как угодно, стоя лежа на боку.
задницей. Интересно поглядеть, как виляешь задницей.
А что с тобой что-то красивое все равно тебе не дам. Я работаю в колхозе и даю по трудодням.
Ой, перешли на семейный на подряд. Ты по выбору даешь, а я шурую всех подряд.
А стариков теперь считают, что народ зажиточный. По помойкам хоть мы ищем уровень прожиточный.
Okay, now I'd love to have some feedback and comments and theories about all this, but since I'm limited in time, I'm going to talk a little bit more. But you see that even the garmoshka players play softer, or they stop a minute so they can listen to the rhyme, figure out what's going on. And some of these people are more accurate than others. And also, I mean, can you tell that it's improvised? You get this feeling, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So why am I showing you all this? I teach a class at Case Western Reserve University in the vocal music of Russia and former Soviet socialist republics. And I often teach it through movement, and I always teach folk dances, but this semester was the pandemic, and I was teaching this class through Zoom. So I said, okay, why don't we study chastushki, and why don't we even produce our own chastushki? So at the end of this, I'm going to show you the final result. So I showed them lots of examples, got them to discuss it, analyze the examples, look at the form of it, and they're sitting in their rooms. How do I get them to move? So there are on YouTube some really good examples of garmoshka or balalaika or even orchestral ostinato for chastushki, in case you want to hear them. So we played about 10 of them, and I said, okay, get up and move. So I can't find them all right now, but so they're in their own room, and they're moving in of any way they want, any way that feels good to them, or feels on the beat, or it feels Russian, whatever. We're exploring, right? So, and I did this over many weeks. So then, what is our theme, since we can't translate all these chastushki that we see on YouTube? So they decided the theme should be the pandemic. I said, okay, fine. So how are we going to find rhymes? So I put on the music, and I had them move. I had them hold a piece of paper and a pencil and go like this. So I'm like, right? That's sort of a rhythm of a chastushki. So I had them verbalize or vocalize, whatever, nonsense syllables. But then they had to do this. How many did they get? 8, right? Then they picked 2 words that rhymed. I've just lost my chair. 2 words that rhyme, and they wrote them on the last beat. So they had 16 beats. So on beat 8, they wrote one word like chair, and then 16th beat, they wrote stare, or whatever they picked. And then, wait, I have to put my...
Yeah, go ahead and take a second there, Terry. You need a chair. Chair, care.
Oh my God. Okay. So then I gave them time, like 5 minutes, to come up with rhymes or a line or 2 lines. And we did this over, again, several weeks. And then we voted on which ostinato we liked. So my balalaika partner, Oleg, had created an ostinato for me many years before. And in the end, we decided to use his, because they knew him, they had met him, they had seen us perform on Zoom, and it was more human, let's say. So they sent me in, and I'm sure you've all done recordings and had your students send you the recordings, and then you put everything together. I don't even know what it's called. So I'm going to show you our final result. What you see is what you see Oleg playing is not really what he's playing, but the audio is the real recording. I mean, I had to make some compromises because of Zoom, right? And underneath, you may or may not be able to see it, is all the words of their verses. Okay, here I go, screen sharing. Can you see it? No, can you see it?
Yeah, we can see it. It's kind of small. If you can make it bigger on your screen.
Okay. How's that?
Much better.
Okay.
I miss school, folks. This isn't a joke. Please do stay home. You are not alone. Shout out to Kamala. She's blazing a trail. We finally have a VP who's not a white male.
Virus prompts large effects. You think you have earned respect? You fool, we did not re-elect. No, those are facts you can't deflect.
To all the ladies, make sure you're wearing shoes. She shattered the glass ceiling. This time we didn't lose.
He's clearly a hard task. Too busy with his ego. Commander in Chief can't multitask.
Beating with my heart, stay 6 feet apart. Starting to get loose. School, I bid you adieu. With a woman Veep of color and a Jewish second spouse, all Americans will be welcome again in the White House. By day and week to week, it all gets more bizarre. I'd rather stand on just one foot and learn to play guitar.
Taking classes all online, school and Zoom should not combine. Teachers choose now to assign so much work we're doing fine.
That's it. That's what we did.
So good. Thank you so much, Terry. There's just so much there. I love it. We've got we're going to keep moving because we want to have a little bit of time to talk a little bit. Our good friend David Bewley is with us. David lives in, I don't know where in Canada you are, David. You'll have to tell us. And he's got a little 5 minutes of moving on the edge.
All right. Well, I live on the edge of Canada, so that's why it's called that. I'm going to share my screen and just sort of show you a map at some point, I hope. Let's see if this works. Is that okay? You can see that, I think. So the edge is, I just wanted to talk quickly about 3 lovely things that I get to do as sort of part of my job at Memorial University. These are what they're called. This is from another presentation, and I just sort of copied the same slides. So community music literacy in coastal Labrador, that's up on the north coast here in this province. There was a gardening project in a prison that I'm involved in, and also a thing called the Lullaby Project, Newfoundland and Labrador. So I live in Newfoundland and Labrador, and here's a map of the world. And we are there on the edge of the continent of North America. And this red thing is called, the bottom part is Newfoundland and the top part is Labrador. Great part of the world. Do come and visit. Oops. Oh, this always happens. Darn. Well, I'll talk about that in a bit. If you're flying from Europe over here, you tend to travel right across Labrador on the way from Europe there. And just to say that this is not a very densely populated area of the world. I live down here in St. John's, which is in the south part of the island of Newfoundland. And about half of the population lives in here. Well, maybe a third of the population of us lives in here. The whole of this area is about 500,000 people. This is larger area of land than, say, Great Britain. So we're really sparsely spread out. These projects that I'm involved in, 2 of them are here in this region, where about half of the population of the province lives. But this one in coastal Labrador is up here in Nain and in Hopedale. These are all flying communities. And we're working with people in those small communities. About 1,000 people live in Nain and about 200 people live in Hopedale. And there's another place called Makovic with about 162 people living there. Learning to play keyboards to help retain a wonderful tradition of making music in Moravian cultures. This is a photograph. I can't go into the whole detail, but this is a photograph of Inuit men and women playing horns as they were taught by Moravian missionaries in the 17th and 18th century. And this tradition is still alive. And although it seems like a really colonial project, and it is really, one of the reasons that the Inuit have retained their Inuktitut language is through the singing of hymns in this tradition. And so they're very proud of their music and they're very, very connected to it. And you can see that this tradition has been one of having organs, beautiful imported German organs, actually, string instruments. They're very much love this music, and they want to rekindle the ability to play the keyboards. Here you see some of the brass band players playing on the roof of their church, and this lovely man, Kerry Obed, is waving from the tower up here, as he was wont to do in his life. Just to say that one of the great privileges in working with Inuit is that they really are very aware of everything around them, spatially and proprioceptionally. And I see wonderful connections between what we do in our Dalcroze work and what that tradition is able to remember through movement. And I'm learning a lot from them, and also trying to help them understand playing the piano in terms of movement as well. And we do some Dalcroze sorts of games in this way. Our original plan was to do this all with in-person classes, but of course the pandemic meant that we had to do it online. And that was a lot of challenge because the bandwidths up there are really thin, but we've had a wonderful time, and some people are making some amazing progress. So that's a little bit of Dalcroze work in a very sort of odd place, but it's just, I guess what happens to me is I realize how fabulous this whole oeuvre of movement and music and understanding music through movement is so important. I'm going to fly on to this project, which is called the Phoenix Garden Project. It takes place in a prison here in the city of St. John's, a horrible, horrible place built in the days of Queen Victoria. So it's called Her Majesty's Penitentiary, and Her Majesty is Victoria, actually, not the present Queen. And not a very nice place to be, and the men who are incarcerated in there are living in very difficult circumstances. But we have initiated a project there that started, I guess about a year ago from now. Partly we had to meet through Zoom, which was challenging, but eventually we got to go in person and meet some wonderful guys. And we've made progress to erect this beautiful greenhouse. And so here you can see some guys inside working on the greenhouse in the summer. And the gardening has been a wonderful thing, of course, therapeutic and so rich and so enjoyable. But here's what's really cool. We always sing something. So when we go in, we ended up singing songs, and then I start to see guys moving and swaying and loving this sense of music and the movement. And they're hard tickets, some of these guys, as we say in Newfoundland. People who are hard tickets are you know, we don't know what they've done, but they're there. Many of them there for a very long time. But in the gardening and in the music making, we have some wonderful opportunities to have relationships that are quite marvelous. We also do a lot of artwork as part of the work of creating gardens. A couple of weeks ago, we had made some reliefs of leaves, and so I brought those back in last week, and I said, oh, you know, there's this really cool song about leaves, or what do you think some songs are about leaves? And they said, and somebody started singing, all the leaves are brown. So of course we had to sing a little bit of California Dreamin', and today, I wasn't able to go today because I had meetings at school all afternoon, but my partner Jan was there, and so they decided, the guys in the gardening project, there's 8 of them there today, they said, we got to have a choir, and so they're going to call the choir All the Leaves Are Brown, which I think is a great name for a choir. But what I want to say is that this sense of movement is so important, and movement and music is so important in this circumstance. And finally, you'll have to tell me, Stephen, when I've got my 5 minutes, because I forgot to look at the clock, but I'll just ramble on.
Go ahead and do your third one.
Just a little bit. Some words here that are very much a part of a wonderful project we have going here called the Lullaby Project, Newfoundland and Labrador. And the Lullaby Project is birthed out of a marvelous thing through Carnegie Hall called the Lullaby Project. Look it up. And my partner Jan and I have had opportunity to do some training there. I think Jan met Veronica through that, or through something other to do with Lincoln Center. And the Lullaby Project here in Newfoundland and Labrador, we've done workshops and work with writing lullabies with women, essentially. First of all, in a prison for women that is about 2 hours drive away from here, but most recently in a place for a shelter for women who are having difficulty in domestic abuse, and so we try to create senses of beauty all the time, and we live in a very beautiful part of the world, but we also recognize that many people struggle with lots of non-beauty. But I wanted to say that we always are, of course, writing lullabies and always interested in music, and are absolutely convinced that through movement we can assuage any of the horrors of domestic abuse and traumas, and by creating something beautiful that people come through that. Tonight we were working a little bit with a group downtown, and I was working with a woman who she just described to me, she wrote a most amazing series of words about her 10-year difficulty with addiction, and then her turning around by having a child that she dearly loves. So she's writing lullabies for that child now. Most remarkable, and this absolutely amazing, strong person. And yet, when we come together, she is, you can see, dealing with trauma. But as soon as we start to sing, you see the waves of anxiety diminish, and the movement becomes smoother, and the relationships become smoother. We wrote a lovely lullaby together in a prison for women. Here it is here, and I just wanted to say, when we sing this together, always you see the tensions relax. And so sometimes we notice in our own work how beautiful and how much we love to move in a rhythmics class. And it's so lovely to be able to see people enjoying movement in small ways in these projects. So I've blathered on a little bit there. If you want to look for more things, look up Waiting for the Time. It's a lovely group song and a wonderful podcast on CBC Radio. Look at lullabynl.ca, and there's some links there. HMP, PGP, we have a website there that shows a bit of the work in the prison. And I'll stop now so that we can get on with talking to each other.
You're very good, David. Thank you so much. I just love all of those projects. And thank you to all of our three presenters this evening. Really, any one of them, it wouldn't be hard at all to fill up 15 easily 15 minutes. We could have spent the whole evening with any one of you. But I think actually the way it worked out tonight, there's some easy connections between all three that we can sort of point at. Before we get into that, I just want to say, just hearing David talk there at the end, I don't know if everybody is familiar with this this book called The Body Keeps Score. There's just an amazing amount of there's just an amazing book by this man named Bissell van der Kolk, who has been writing and researching for many years, talking about
David. What was the author?
I put the link here in the chat. If you just click the link in the chat, you'll be able to pull up the book. But this man has, I believe that this is at least his second sort of big book, and he's been doing research for many years, but has sort of come at this angle of trauma, saying you can't really get into talking about therapy unless you're going to recognize the body that that the trauma is a part of, and that so much of, as I understand it, so much of what he's talking about is that oftentimes when people are pushed into traumatic situations, the experience is actually one of being separated from ourselves. And so there's ways where sort of what we think and what we feel get separated, there's a distance, a chasm that's put in. And by re-engaging the body, a lot of the therapeutic part of it is trying to remember that we actually have a body and that we are sort of bodied, and that we experience the world through the lens of the mind body, not just mind, but that if you don't include the body part or don't find a way to reintegrate it, that you remain broken. And Jacques Dalcroze, although certainly not using any of this more modern language, he absolutely wrote about how participating in these bodied exercises were ways of sort of bringing the student sort of back and he talked about smoothing the temperament. And I think anybody who has worked with children in any of these sort of bodied situations, certainly the exercises that come out of the Dalcroze traditions, we see students who just seem like, I'll just be rude and say, seem just crazy or just zany or just like completely out of control, until all of a sudden we get into some of these bodied routines. And then all of a sudden, all sorts of sort of like new knowing and new emotional stability, all sorts of new ways of being able to interact with each other, new ways of expressing creativity, new ways of taking risks. I mean, we see it over and over, whether it's with, I'll just, the way David's talking about the communities that he's working with, particularly as I was just picturing the men in the prison. But then I also see the same thing with my university students, and I see the same thing with my high schoolers, and I saw the same thing with the children when I was working with them. And so I just wanted to point that little bit of research out. If you want to look a little bit more into that particular suggestion, in the National Public Radio here in the United States, you can look up NPR, and there's I believe it's an NPR program called On Being, and I believe just within the last week or two, the moderator was interviewing this man again and his work, and I just thought every Dalcrozian should listen to that particular episode of On Being, with Tippett is the woman's last name, who
Krista Tippett.
Krista Tippett, yeah, it was a wonderful episode. So Terry, just as we sort of jump on, as I was watching everybody, I really wasn't thinking about therapy as the connecting force here. It was obviously about getting the bodies involved, and with music and movement and all. But Terry, it seemed like, some of what it meant to teach in Zoom in the middle of the pandemic, there's some of that as well, in that we're distanced from each other, and then finding ways to not just have the students make up rhymes, but that there was this whole sort of bodied dance aspect with it. Do you want to comment just a moment on how you felt that contributed to the overall action? You have thoughts?
I'm not, I mean, you sort of said it.
Well, it just seemed to me that asking the students to actually physically invest as opposed to just emotionally or mentally invest, adds something to the room. And so,
right, I think that they weren't really, it wasn't clear to them that they could actually come up with their own rhymes or anything meaningful or anything relevant. But once I got them moving, and we did a lot of moving over the weeks, we kept getting out of our chairs and doing it more. And I think that they got really excited about it then, once they started. And also the fact that emotionally, they got to say what they wanted to say. It's a very frustrating, difficult, scary semester. And they were pretty blunt about, if you look at their words, they got to really express themselves this is a Russian phenomenon translated to our situation in English. We didn't improvise. And our movement was, like, you can see the young woman, the Oriental woman, she's a concert violinist. And she's had ballet. You can see that in her movement.
Yeah.
So this kind of thing too was
So
interesting.
are you saying that you felt that the rhyming was actually harder at the beginning until they started moving, and then the rhyming?
Absolutely. They had no idea what to do.
Huh.
Like da ba da ba. But when I gave them this sort of framework, and then the framework of the two rhymes and the structure, the rhythm, then things started coming to them.
So interesting. Laura, you have a question?
Just something I noticed with the people in Serbia when they were doing it to the music. The music was, of course, very repetitive, and they could wait as long as they wanted within reason. It wasn't like they had to come back after exactly 4 beats or 8 beats. They just could move around and dance. So I think, in a way, I really liked that. Like, it gave it a little bit more freedom.
Yeah, but I have to say it's Russia. This phenomena is Russia, not Serbia.
Oh, okay. I thought you said it was in Serbia.
No, Russia.
I was wondering because they didn't seem to be wearing a lot of winter coats, which I would think in Serbia. But the other thing I noticed is that they all seemed older. Like, do younger kids do it, as younger people do it as well?
It's such a fascinating phenomenon. In the very first video, you saw there was a very young man who put his face to the camera at the end.
Yeah.
And often it is an older woman teasing a younger man. And then the crowd, they're all staraki, which means senior citizens, pensioners. But there are ethnomusicologists who are trying to record this phenomenon, bring it back. There are set verses of Chastushki that you can actually memorize and sing in concert. There are specialists who come to your wedding and will sing Chastushki about you and your spouse.
I think that's a Jewish tradition also, in old Jewish tradition at weddings. Some of that, like with the Botkin, or I forget, but the person who runs the wedding, they do a lot of that kind of improvising.
I think one of the things that I'm really loving about, there's so much fun here. There's just so many things that can come out of it. Just to tie it back to Dalcroze one more time, what I really appreciate about Terry's presentation, and particularly in this format that is here at the virtual Dalcroze meetup, and recognizing that this is applicable here. To me, it's not applicable only because there's some dancing around in the screen and there's some improvisation going on. But I also love it in that it isn't a traditional Dalcroze exercise. And yet in this event that is already, that already pre-exists, we're able to recognize all sorts of things that are in common with the kinds of attentions that we're often looking for. And so just for anybody who might be new to this community, or somebody who's maybe going to watch this video after the fact, while we certainly do have, quite a toolbox of good tried and true exercises that every long-term Dalcrozian has probably participated in, I find it really exciting and so outstanding anytime we're able to bring new material in, it's like a whole new game basically, which we can try to do it in the most traditional Russian way, or we can also say, oh, no, I was influenced by, I saw this thing that Terry did once, and there was this thing with couplets, and then there was like dance breaks in between, and we found a way. And then you have the permission always as a Dalcrozian, just sort of be inspired and then think, how could I adjust this for my students? So I'm going to work with 7-year-olds this week, or I'm going to work with, with men in the prison, or I'm going to work with people here. And so like, what would be the version of this that would work for that community? And so it's both really exciting as an ethnomusicology, kind of like, here's a really beautiful slice of tradition. And then there's also these aspects of what ways could we build on this? And so I just love that, I feel like Terry was demonstrating both of those things. Before we go too much further, go ahead, Terry. And then I want to make sure we say hi to Jennifer one more time.
So I actually did this at an ORF conference, and I had about 80 people in the session, and there was an instrumentarium. So there was an orchestra side and there were the singers side, and there were, in the orchestra, they did have set times to improvise. And so it was quite a huge phenomenon. But again, I was limited to 75 minutes, so there's only so much you can do. But it was quite successful. It was very interesting.
That is always the curse of the Dalcrozian. There's never enough time. I tell my students all the time. I say, you don't even know me yet. I said, but pretty soon you're going to know that the only thing I ever complain about is that I never have enough time, and that we just need more time to really see all of these ideas through. I have questions or comments for Jennifer, but before I take the last couple of minutes with it, anybody else have questions or anything they want to push at Jennifer's direction? Question or comment? I'll just say, Jennifer, we've loved having you present each of the times that you do. You just bring such a great energy to it. The idea of storytelling and of having the students come up with their own ideas as a way of sort of narrating and then sort of keeping track of the songs as they sort of play out, is just lovely and opens up so many opportunities. And so I'm sure we could easily take the next half hour and now think, what are the next 20 little projects that, starting with what you gave us, how could we spin that into the next thing? Chris, I see your hands up.
Hey everybody, sorry, I'm on mobile, so I don't know what this looks like.
It looks good.
Right, great. I just wanted to add or ask for Jennifer. I find myself wrestling a lot with learning objectives, and maybe some of you do too in your own jobs. I love that all of the guests tonight offered less a learning objective and more of a framework, or sort of you build the basketball court and then they play the game. Jennifer, in your own work, how much do you have to think about or speak in terms of what's the goal here? I think it's lovely how creative the students got to be here and the stories they created.
Did we lose Jennifer? She disappeared from my screen. Oh no. Oh, she's back. There she goes.
I'm sorry, my electricity just flickered for a second and then my internet had to reconnect. I heard something about the idea of storytelling and then...
Chris, I think you have to summarize your question one more time.
I'm trying to understand, on the one hand, we have these learning objectives. Some disciplines are obsessed with that. And on the other hand, we have Dalcroze where we create this framework for creativity to take place, a little less obsessed with objectives. What are your words for that?
You have a question about objectives?
I just feel like that's the cliche about Suzuki. We're just trying to get the notes into the brains and then we get to go home. But you did more than that here, and that's exciting to me.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if there's no heart or soul in it, then for the child, like, what is their memory going to be of this? And that's what music making. It's about sharing something. It's about being human. And so yes, like the Suzuki sort of discipline is there to serve us. It's a tool, but it's only one part of the puzzle. for me. And so I think it's essential to do this kind of work. But yeah, learning how to balance it can be a little bit tricky. And I'm still learning, and I think we're probably all still juggling that constantly.
That's
So
very
hopefully I
good.
answered the question. I missed it.
That's okay. The flick of the electricity is funny. Alice, you have a hand up, and then I think we're about out of time.
Yeah, just thank you, Jennifer. That was beautiful, the way you had a student to construct a story that made the music so much more meaningful and memorable. But I agree with Chris Rose that today's administrators and people who basically head up schools want everything to be quantifiable. The concept of joy and movement and many of the things, I think, was it David spoke about, that doesn't enter into their vision. I don't even know if you could call it a vision. So I think we have to do what we do and realize that some things are not quantifiable but exceedingly important. That's all what you said really resonated.
Yeah. That whole, I mean, we should probably dedicate a couple whole events just to talking about the difference between teaching to the test and then trying to figure out, what is emergent and what does it mean to sort of open up a space for learning, and what is appropriate, what can you ramrod into a student, and what really can you just plant seeds and then trust that they'll grow.
Something that will be meaningful for their lives or to their lives. Yeah.
Helen, you got a last minute hand up. We got a call on you. We'll let you say something, but you got to unmute. There you go. Oh, try again.
Yep, good. Okay, thank you so much. I've enjoyed this very much, and I've messaged Jennifer. I'm also a Suzuki teacher, and I've also just sent a message to Chris saying I really appreciated his question too. Jennifer and I are going to keep in touch, but if anyone else wants to keep in touch, I guess I'll put my email up. I'm from Western Australia, and I'm very interested in young children Suzuki movement, that whole thing of drama that came out, the visual arts, the dance. I've enjoyed this session so much for all presenters, but I think we'll just have a little breakout Suzuki group with Jennifer and I for a minute with emails. But anyone else wants to join, I'll put my message into general chat. So if anyone wants to keep in touch with that, I'll if you just grab it out of the chat. Thanks.
Very
Thank you
good.
so much to everyone. It was just wonderful.
Absolutely. And Helen, I hope you know the reason that we're meeting at this hour is specifically so that we can get Australia and Japan and Singapore and people in your area of the globe to be able to come in. It's actually a little bit late for some of us, and we're a little sleepy, but we are really pleased. So every other meetup, we try to rotate between the time that'll work for Europe and the time that'll work for your end of the world. So welcome, and it's so good to see you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, everybody, we try to start on time and end on time, so I'm gonna let it. We're gonna pause. I want to wish everybody the best holiday. It's Thanksgiving week here in the States, and then the New Year and Christmas and all of that is coming. I posted the link to the little podcast about trauma in the body, which it's really fascinating stuff. And if you listen to it with a Dalcrozian lens, you'll mine even more out of it than they were planning. It's really, I just thought, absolutely outstanding. We've also got a couple more, some emails and some another book here in the chat. So I'm gonna pause the recording, and I'm gonna leave this open just so that everybody has a chance to copy and paste whatever you need to. Everyone, thank you so much. Happy New Year to you. Oh, I promised you, we are super excited to announce that our first masterclass of the new year will be with Joan Pope of Australia. And so we're sure she's gonna break all the what's it called? All the standards that have been set in the past. Joan Pope, if you haven't met her, is just an amazing spirit and a wonderful Dalcrozian with a tremendous body of work behind her. And you can see her on one of these meetups if you go to our archive page and just hear her sort of riff for about 20 minutes, and it's jaw-dropping what she just came up with in that. It's by far the most popular meetup we've ever had, and so we were able to get her to agree to do an hour and a half with us in the new year. It'll be in February, I believe. So we'll be announcing that, and we have we're waiting for confirmation on 2 more master classes in the spring. So again, thank you everyone, and we'll see you soon.